Hi guys, today I want to bring you to the Land of 1,000 Caves, Bet Gavra Marisa in Israel. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site with over 2,500 years of history. This significant archaeological site houses numerous underground caves. Some are linked by underground tunnels. These caves show signs of advanced technology and could be products of a prehistory sophisticated civilization. There is a lot to talk about on this site. Today I'll focus on two types of caves, the enormous bell caves and the intriguing columbarium caves to house pigeons. This fascinating site, called City Under a City, is a 1,250-acre national park with two parts. The southern part is Tel Marisa, the mount of the biblical city of Marisa during the time of the first temple, which is 10th to 6th century BC. All the man-made caves are located here. Many of the caves are linked via an underground network of pathways that connected groups of 40 to 50 caves. Marisa was destroyed in 40 BC by the ancient Iranians known as the Parthians. After Marisa's demise, the neighboring town of Bet Gavran succeeded it as the main settlement in the northern part. It's an important town in the Roman era, known as the Eleutheropolis. Today it contains the remains of a Roman amphitheater. Marisa's caves were excavated from the thick and homogeneous layer of soft chalk, a moraine limestone in Lower Judea. It includes over 800 bell caves, chambers, and tunnels. The caves were alleged to be quarries, and later on converted for various agricultural and craft industry purposes, including olive oil presses, columbaria, stables, cisterns, baths, tomb complexes, places of worship, and hiding places during troubled times. Let's look at these spectacularly unique bell caves. They are large, over 60 feet or 18 meters high, airy, and remain cool in the desert summer. The Bell Cave complex has 70 connected bell-shaped caves, which are acclaimed quarries for mining stone for mortar and plaster and to extract lime for cement. Arabic inscriptions on the Bell Cave walls indicate roughly 2,000 years of activity here. Some of the Bell Caves collapsed, but many are still standing. It's very impressive that these cavernous caves maintained their structural integrity for thousands of years. The current explanation of the ancient quarrying method is to open a small hole in the hard surface, which is gray limestone on the ground level. When the digger reached to the soft chalk below, they enlarged it and made all the caves. Each cave eventually cut into the ones adjacent to it. Rectangular blocks were removed from the caves with ropes. These caves could well be quarries, though the excavation theory doesn't sound convincing to me. Here I'm showing some ancient quarry sites and lime pits in Israel, which are from about the same time frame. We can see how different these open-pit quarries look in comparison to the Bell Caves. The techniques that created the Bell Caves are strikingly more advanced. Open-pit quarrying is much easier and safer than underground quarrying. Why did ancient workers at Marisa decide to quarry stone underground, unlike the other nearby quarries? Why were the quarry pits created in such unusual bell shapes? Bell caves are similar to structurally secure parabolic domes, which required careful calculation and planning. How did ancient workers know that these domes would be stable and wouldn't collapse on themselves? What type of lighting did they use inside these caves? Also, I want to point out the obvious tool marks in the caves. Even though the various caves at Marisa are distinctly different, there is one thing they have in common. They all have large, uniformed, parallel tool marks. The tool marks here look just like the ones I have been pointing out on many ancient sites, such as Baalbek, Petra, Yangshan Monument, Longyou Caves, and many more. I explained why such marks cannot be done by hand tools such as chisels or pickaxes. Click the link above to see that video. In short, the uniformed, large, region-groove tool marks resemble modern-day machine marks. Manual labor cannot achieve this level of consistency, even on stone that is soft enough to dig with fingernails. We can't even draw such marks with the same consistency, let alone carve them by hand on stone in this massive scale. So I believe this is a perceivable sign that the sites with such tool marks were made by a prehistory advanced civilization with a machinery similar to what we have today. Are there other clues that existed to support this theory? How about the curious-looking Columbarian caves with many niches? It's stated that the caves were dug during the 3rd century BC. Roman Columbarium is a place with niches for storages of the deceased ashes in urns, but no trace of ash was found at Marissa. Moreover, cremation was not the burial practice for the land at that time. So what were the niches meant for? The most commonly accepted theory is that the Columbarium is a place to raise doves and pigeons. The word comes from Latin columba, which means dove. The national park has 85 columbaria, which are still inhabited by many pigeons. The so-called Polish cave was said to be a cistern initially, then repurposed as a columbarium when visiting Polish soldiers carved an inscription in 1943. I've never seen anything like this before. Caves with many carefully carved rows of niches. It turns out that doves were used intensively in the ancient world. Their meat and eggs were nourishing food sources and their droppings used as fertilizer. During my research, I found that Tel Marissa is not the only one with such a complicated cave system. There are more in the nearby region, such as the Luzit Caves, Beit Lehi, and Adullam Friends Park, just to name a few. They all have the same uniformed, large parallel tool marks as we can see here. And they all have the columbaria with rows of niches. The caves are connected through narrow pathways or tunnels, which form a complex system that can be considered as underground cities. The amount of excavation work is stunning. Look at the bell caves at Luzit. The scale and shape are pretty close to the ones at Marissa, though some niches are higher up, which could be a sign that certain bell caves were created with niches initially. The central round opening and oversized scale reminds me of the magnificent landmark, Pantheon, in Rome, which could well have been inspired by bell caves like these. The stone caves with rows of niches are so fascinating that I want to find more information about them. I realized that they are a widespread phenomenon, not only in Israel, but also in Jordan, Turkey, Italy, and France. Here are some photos from these sites. I also found a paper online providing evidence for pigeon breeding in Columbaria in Jordan. Pigeon Valley in Cappadocia, Turkey, was named for the many pigeon houses or columbaria carved into the cliffs. The niches are in slightly different shapes, though the composition features are very much the same as the one we saw in Marissa. However, that doesn't prove the original columbarium were designed to raise pigeons, nor does it prove that the columbarium or bell caves were created 2,500 years ago, which is the currently acclaimed time. As I said earlier, the caves at Marissa show machine marks and might have been excavated by a previous advanced civilization thousands of years before ours. Are the columbaria or the pigeon farms from that civilization? I want to take a minute to explore a little further on dove pigeon raising culture. I was a bit surprised to learn that the pigeons would come back to the columbarium
the pigeon farm, even though they could easily fly out.
Then I realized that doves or pigeons were domesticated, and in fact the rock dove was the first bird that got domesticated. In nature, rock doves nest in cliff sides or caves. Mesopotamia clay tablets mention the domestication of pigeons more than 5,000 years ago. So do Egyptian hieroglyphics. Research suggests that domestication of pigeons occurred as early as 10,000 years ago around the alluvial plains of the Tigris and the Euphrates. Dove is an important symbol in multiple cultures and religions, and doves were a historically important food and fertilizer source in the Middle East, North Africa, and Europe. Here are photos of the mesmerizing old dove cotes in Iran, Egypt, and Britain. In medieval times, the possession of a dove cote was a symbol of status and power.
Now that we know pigeons were domesticated a long time ago, how long did it take to domesticate an animal like a pigeon or a dove?
The short answer is we don't know. Probably several thousand years for true domestication. Domestication is not the same as taming. A wild animal or a wild animal born in captivity may be tamed, but they're not truly domesticated and remain genetically wild. The cubs of a tamed animal won't have the intrinsic taming behavior. Domestic animals are believed to have been selectively bred and genetically adapted over generations to live alongside humans. They're genetically distinct from their wild ancestors or cousins, sort of like current-day dogs to wolves. Historians have learned about animal domestication from fossils. It seems that animal domestication is partly tied to human domestication, where the humans shift from hunter-gatherers to farmers. As some people became farmers and started settling in one place, raising domesticated livestock offered them the convenience of fresh meat as well as manure for fertilizing crops. It's believed that the civilizations which domesticated animals and plants consequently wielded more power and were able to spread their cultures and languages. Because most major acts of animal domestication began before recorded history, we don't know much about the exact process, though scholars consider animal domestication a millennia-long process, similar to plant domestication. In 1959, a Soviet biologist started an experiment to domesticate silver foxes. Within a decade, he claimed he successfully domesticated them. A recent review found the results of the farm fox experiment were overrated. The foxes were not really domesticated but selectively bred for subservient and tame behavior.
So far, there is no consensus on how animals got domesticated. The current theories are only as good until the next archaeological dig, where new evidence shows up, which may change the current paradigm of thought dramatically.
Based on the evidence we have today, pigeons became domesticated 10,000 years ago. Two potential explanations could result in this outcome. 1. Our ancestors consistently practiced selective breeding generation after generation. They eventually achieved to genetically change and domesticate the bird. How did prehistoric people manage to pass along this tradition for thousands of years? Was the method of systematically domesticating animals passed along orally or in written language? The earliest written language known today was the Egyptian hieroglyph from 4,700 years ago, which is 5,300 years after the domestication practice. That means the message was transferred through spoken language, which is rather incredible. The second explanation is that the domesticated animals were genetically changed through DNA manipulation by a previous advanced civilization. I know this is an unusual, even far-fetched theory, but technologically it's possible. This remote possibility could go hand in hand with the hypothesis of a prehistory advanced civilization creating the complex cave systems.
Civilizations rise and fall in cycles. We should consider that current theories are ever progressing and thus not set in stone. With new technology, archaeologists are finding new evidence which changes our thought on human history. There is so much that we don't know and can't explain. It's okay if we don't have all the answers. The seeking, unraveling, and discovering makes life both fuller and more meaningful.
Let's go back to the caves at Bet Gurren Marissa in Israel. Let me summarize. 1. The caves at Marissa, despite being in different layouts, show two marks that resemble modern-day machine marks, which can only be accomplished by an advanced civilization with highly developed technology. 2. The large-scale bell caves present sophisticated engineering knowledge. 3. The columbaria for fishing pigeons means the pigeons were domesticated when the caves were excavated. How did animals get domesticated is still unknown, but it happened before our recorded history. If we accept the hypothesis that such amazing cave systems were created by a prehistory civilization, with columbarians to raise pigeons, then maybe the same civilization was the one which started domesticating pigeons, possibly among other domesticated animals, and maybe they even utilized genetic manipulation.
What do you think? If you have any insights, please leave me a comment. I would love to hear from you. If you like my video, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe. I have a wide range of topics that I want to share with you. This is Curious Being. I'm Tina. Thanks for watching and see you next time.